Who'd win in a fight between Anderson Silva and Georges St-Pierre? Most fans would say Silva because he's the spider, or GSP because he's the GOAT. But let me tell you one thing, it's MMA, you can never bet on a fighter unless you've analyzed the stats, compared their fighting style. So this video will break down the entire Silva versus GSP saga. Why didn't UFC schedule their matchup? And if it had happened, who'd have won? But to answer all these questions, we need to rewind and start from the beginning. It was the year 2006 when Anderson the Spider Silva made his debut in UFC. His first fight was against Chris Lieben, whom he finished in the first round, and he became a challenger for a middleweight title shot. A few months later, Anderson faced Rich Franklin, dominated him with flying knees, and won the UFC middleweight championship. For the next 2 years, he defended his title 5 times against many opponents like Lutter, Marquardt, Henderson, and Cote. No UFC champion across any weight class had matched the Spider's pace of defenses in such a short time frame. His light-speed striking, Brazilian heritage, and multilingual post-fight interviews made him a global star. But this easy-come fame wasn't enough to prove to the world what a true beast he is. So Anderson planned a strategic move. In July 2009, he competed in light heavyweight non-title bouts. His debut against Irvin was a statement, proving he's not just good at 185 pounds, he's even better at 205 pounds. Anderson's Muay Thai, pinpoint counter-striking, and psychological warfare made him a feared champion. By 2012, he had successfully defended his middleweight title 10 consecutive times. Around the same year, Georges "Rush" St-Pierre made a comeback after an 11-month layoff due to an ACL injury. At UFC 154, he faced off against Carlos Condit and dominated him throughout all 5 rounds. GSP's career trajectory is quite similar to Anderson's. He won his first welterweight title in 2006 and defended it 9 times. From 2006 to 2012, both were considered UFC's 2 biggest stars and pound-for-pound kings, often ranked number 1 and number 2 globally. With them ruling the scene, MMA fans were desperate to see a super fight. Speculations rose high, but talks faded quickly as the matchup never made it past the rumor stage. Still, if that fight had actually gone down, it would have been one for the ages. To even start guessing who would have come out on top, we've got to look at the stats and see how they stacked up. Physically, Silva had that natural size advantage. The guy stood 6'2" with a 77.5-inch reach. He'd walk around at about 210 pounds and then cut down to 185 like it was nothing. He moved up to light heavyweight not just to hang around but to dominate. He played 3 fights and won all 3, which showed he could take down bigger guys. On the other side, GSP is built different. He stands firm at 5'11" with a 76-inch reach. He'd usually cut from around 190 down to 170, which made him a true welterweight. But when it came to moving up for just 1 fight, it could crush his career.
Going up is not the problem. Is when you try to go back down, you screw your career, you know? Because you don't play with your weight like this.
So GSP had one request for the super fight to happen.
I had one request. I said, okay, I'll fight Anderson Silva, but in a catch weight.
Going up to 185 full-time and coming back to 170 wasn't something he took lightly. Anderson could fight at 205 and look smooth, which made a lot of fans think he'd just be too much for GSP physically. But without looking at the numbers, we can't conclude anything. When fight speculations were high, Anderson overall had 34 wins, 7 losses, and 1 no contest on his resume, while GSP had 25 wins and just 2 losses. In UFC records, Anderson went 17-4 with 1 no contest, while GSP went 19-2. Anderson's UFC run from 2006 to 2013 was something special. He racked up 16 straight wins and defended the middleweight title 10 times. That reign lasted over 2,447 days. Nobody had done that before. GSP on his end had 2 title runs at welterweight and defended the belt 9 times. From 2007 to 2013, he was on a 12-fight tear of his own. If we're talking pure dominance, Anderson might have the edge with that insane streak and how long he held the throne. But GSP, that guy was near perfect. His only losses came early, one to Matt Hughes and the other in that shocker against Matt Serra. After that, he came back and just started shutting everyone down. By 2016, though, Anderson was clearly slowing down. He had dropped 4 fights in the UFC, including 2 to Chris Weidman and that close one with Bisping. Then there was the no contest with Nick Diaz, which turned messy after a failed drug test. While GSP had been out since 2014, his record stayed spotless, and it left fans wondering what more he could have done if he had stuck around. As UFC Hall of Famers, a fight between Anderson Silva and Georges St-Pierre would have been massive. It could have gotten record-breaking pay-per-view numbers. It could have hit the same level of hype we saw with McGregor versus Diaz, or even McGregor versus Khabib. Fans were all over it. What made it even crazier was that the UFC had never seen a super fight like this before. Two reigning champions, both still in their prime and both sitting at the top of pound-for-pound lists. Usually, super fights come with one guy past his peak or moving divisions after a loss. But this was the rare case where both fighters were just perfect. So why didn't this super fight ever happen? It came down to a mix of timing, size, and just not being able to get everything lined up at the right moment. First off, weight was a big issue. Anderson was a natural middleweight at 185 pounds, while GSP lived at 170 as a welterweight. GSP was always super calculated, and moving up 15 pounds to face a bigger, more powerful guy like Anderson wasn't something he took lightly. On the flip side, Silva wasn't about to cut all the way down to 170. He was walking around at over 200 pounds. The only way they could set this match up was agreeing on a catch weight somewhere between 177 and 180 pounds. But it never got past the talking stage. Nobody could agree on the details, and the UFC didn't push hard to make it happen. Then there was the timing. Both guys had their hands full defending their belts. Silva had wars with guys like Chael Sonnen and Vitor Belfort, while GSP was dealing with top contenders like BJ Penn, Carlos Condit, and Johnny Hendricks. The window for this fight was tight, and it kept getting pushed aside by title defenses. By 2013, that window basically slammed shut. Silva lost his title to Chris Weidman in a huge upset at UFC 162, and not long after, GSP stepped away from the sport after a tough fight with Hendricks at UFC 167. He vacated the belt and took a long break. Behind the scenes, the UFC didn't seem too eager either. Dana White mentioned that GSP wasn't willing to fight. The only way this fight could have happened was if the UFC had agreed to GSP's catchweight request, but they didn't entertain it. After that, things got even messier, with Anderson failing multiple drug tests. Both fighters' PR teams also seem more focused on keeping their champions active in their respective divisions rather than risking it all on a super fight that might not come together cleanly. But even with all the roadblocks and the missed chances, the question still sparks. If the fight had actually happened, who would have won? Anderson uses mental traps to protect his confidence and distract the opponent from his goal until the end, where he uses his strategic martial arts techniques to put them down. It could be a flying hook, a kick, or even a takedown. But GSP, being a true genius, learns his opponent's weaknesses and strengths and then strategizes his whole gameplay. Like in the fight against Michael Bisping, he knew Bisping was blind in the right eye. GSP took advantage of that and exploited him. Similarly, in the match against BJ Penn, he took him down by exploiting BJ's weaknesses. So if the fight had happened in 2012 at welterweight, which as most experts say was the best time, GSP would clearly have outclassed Anderson because Anderson at 170 pounds would be weaker than GSP. His striking game wouldn't be as solid as GSP's takedown game, so GSP would have been a clear winner. And if this fight had happened in 2017 when GSP moved to middleweight, he would have again outclassed Anderson because by now he had lost his spark. He wasn't the same stinging spider after his loss to Chris Weidman.